Ever since the first major arc concluded for The Promised Neverland, many, I mean many, not just on YouTube, but all over social media, ever since the first arc of The Promised Neverland was concluded, many have been saying that The Promised Neverland does not have that excitement it once had. And this is a topic I've been meaning to make for a while, and I decided, you know what, let's sit down and let's just see what everybody feels about this, if it's true or if it's not true. I kind of just want to get the discussion on out there. So anyways, what this video is about, it's basically to talk about what has happened since the first arc, like the first major arc ended when, you know, the children escaped from the farm. But also, let's talk about why many are saying it has lost that excitement that it once had when they first started reading this series. So let's look at The Promised Neverland. When it first started, it was a survival manga, or trying to escape off of a place. It was like escape from prison, or escape from, like, you know, a shelter or something. It's just anything. Just get out of a place that's obviously set against you. And so it made everybody fascinated because, like, how are these children going to escape from this place that obviously, you know, wants to end their lives? Many were constantly asking this while reading the chapters, what will happen next? And the way the writer was able to give us a cliffhanger every single chapter and make it to where we were so into it, we were tensed up, and there was so much suspense as the, you know, chapters continued to come out, we didn't really know what to expect. And overall, I feel like that's what really drew in so many people into this series, was because of the way the writer handled the cliffhangers of The Promised Neverland. I feel like that was one of the big shining moments that made the series so good. It was how he was able to capture the readers to continue on reading next week. For instance, you see this scene with Crone at the beginning of, you know, The Promised Neverland. You see this evil face and how she's calculating and stuff, and she's about to do something, and then, you know, the chapter ends, and you're like, oh crap, what's gonna happen? Like, well, what's the next move? What are the children gonna do to get out of this one? Next chapter happens, overall, everything is kind of solved, and then we're left off with another cliffhanger that is even more intense and has a lot of suspense for the next week's chapter. And so this was a constant, reoccurring thing throughout the first arc. And since then, since the first arc, you know, ended, everything that was built up finally concluded. They got out, but now the next objective is to escape from the demon world, which is like the next big step for the series. So overall, it's kind of like the series is still the same. It's like the first arc. Like, the first arc was more self-contained into a little area, while this new arc that we're getting into is a much greater experience, because it's like the cage that was like maybe 2 foot or whatever, or just smaller, like you're stuck in a little box, is now expanded into like a mansion. That's basically what has happened after the first arc. The cage has now been extended. And so it's the same thing, but it's extended. And I feel like this is one of the big problems that the series is currently facing. So far, the writer has shown that the writer is very competent when it comes to the storytelling, to the characters, to the pacing. Just overall, everything about the series seems to be really good. There really doesn't seem to be any major flaws when it comes to The Promised Neverland. The only thing that really stands out to me is actually the artwork. Now, granted, there is a different artist working on it separately. For instance, there's an artist working on The Promised Neverland, and then there's the writer. They're just 2 separate people working on their individual things. One's writing the script, one's doing the art. And so sometimes the art is not up to, you know, 10 out of 10 like it usually is, and sometimes it kind of degrades in quality, which is to be expected for a weekly manga series. It's to be expected. And also, I don't really know the track record to these 2 individuals, the writer and the artist, so don't quote me on anything I am about to say here, but I believe this is their first work. Now, like I said, don't quote me. They could have had another work or whatever, but I do believe this is their first work, or first major work they've had that's lasted this long, and so they're really not used to like a weekly schedule, release schedule, so it makes sense why there would be some issues when it comes to the art, because getting used to like a weekly release, it's gonna drain you. And we know for a fact when it comes to living conditions for mangaka and what they're doing when it comes to drawing and stuff, it's utter hell. I mean, think about what Oda has stated. Oda barely sleeps. This man only gets like, I think, 4 or 5 hours a night of rest. This is why the man actually takes breaks every couple weeks, because Shonen Jump's like, you need to take a break. Like, you need to take a break. You know, the readers of the series, like, you need to take a break. We don't want you to run yourself ragged to where you just pass out and all that from overwork. We want you to take a break, Oda-sensei. So, we know for a fact when it comes to living conditions for mangaka, it's not always good. And so that could explain why sometimes the art does dip in quality. So at first glance, when you look at The Promised Neverland, it doesn't seem like there is any noticeable problems. However, I think there is one thing that is causing it, though. After really thinking about it, and I've already kind of briefly discussed it earlier on in this video, one of the big things I think that have actually caused it where many's excitement has worn dry, and they no longer are as passionate to read the next chapter, is thanks to how the first arc was handled, and how the writer continuously did the exact same thing even after the first major arc ended. Let me explain. Remember what I already said in this video. Every single chapter of The Promised Neverland in the first major arc ended in a cliffhanger that made you want to read the next chapter. And it worked. It was a really good idea, and it was able to gain a big fan base. Many enjoyed The Promised Neverland thanks to the way the writing was done and how it just kept you always wondering what will happen next. And that was, I think, one of the main reasons why it became so successful was because of that strategy. However, since that has happened, since the first arc, this pattern has continued. Every single chapter ends off in a cliffhanger that tries to be suspenseful, have a lot of tension. And even though it tries to do that, after this time being over 50 plus chapters into The Promised Neverland, we've all kind of grown accustomed to this. We have all become very aware that The Promised Neverland will always have a cliffhanger. It will always have a cliffhanger that makes you like, holy crap, what's gonna happen? Are they all in danger? Are they gonna, are they gonna lose someone next week? And that's the question you're always asking. And I feel like this is actually the downfall why many are not as excited as they once were. Because of every single week ending off with a cliffhanger, many have now come to expect that the cliffhanger is just there to be there for just a troll reason or just to make you read the next chapter, even though nothing really major would happen in the first place. I mean, let's take for an example what's been happening in the recent chapters. You have it to where the adult that they met, it looks like he's going to do something crazy to the children, but then we turn out and find out that it's not really much. Like, the man doesn't want to harm the children at all. He's actually just crazy, but he doesn't want to harm the children. Or if we go to last week's chapter, where it ended off with this wall just being really creepy, a bunch of names on it, stuff showing the mental state of the dude, there was no discussion about that in the latest chapter. It wasn't even mentioned at all, which goes into, once again, the main topic. Why is The Promised Neverland no longer as exciting as it once was? It's because of this. Many are not really looking forward to the next chapter anymore because the overall cliffhangers aren't like they used to be. Because the cliffhangers, we've all come to expect that it's just there to be there, and there's not going to be anything crazy exciting happening every single chapter. It's unrealistic. In terms of writing, it's unrealistic to have every single chapter 10 out of 10 with something crazy happening. Even One Piece suffers from this flaw. Yes, even Oda-sensei, and he is one of the best writers when it comes to shonen. He has a really good manga, but even he suffers pacing issues sometimes, or just chapters that are not really good at all, or they're just like, and you just carry on to the next week. And if you were to binge read it, obviously it'd be much better, but when it comes to a weekly release schedule, they're not really that good. And that's kind of what's happening here. The Promised Neverland has kind of lost its steam because the writer was thriving off of the cliffhangers, but they're no longer as good. You expect that there's not really going to be much crazy things happening next week, so it's in a a downward spiral right now, where it's not gaining any popularity, and many are not really excited for it anymore, and that's what I believe is truly happening to the series right now, why many are saying it's not as good as it once was. Now, in terms of what the objective is of the series, I personally believe that The Promised Neverland has gotten a lot more exciting. It's a very exciting series. Like I've already said, it's like the birdcage was extended into a large mansion, and it's the same objective, just a little bit different. There's a little bit more circumstances or restrictions, and it's the same series. So everything you know and love from The Promised Neverland is technically still there from the first arc, but it's just the way the writing has been, I think, has caused it to where people are no longer liking it, because the writer needs to spice it up somehow. He needs to figure out a way to spice it up and give us something that doesn't just rely on the way a chapter ends. That is my 2 cents on the subject and why I think The Promised Neverland might not be as exciting as it once was. Personally, I'm still enjoying this series. I'm still having a lot of fun with this series, but I could definitely see why many would not be as excited as they once were because of the way the ending cliffhangers are done every single chapter. So what do you think is the problem with The Promised Neverland? Why do you think that many aren't as excited anymore? Do you think it's what I stated, or do you think it's something else I did not mention at all in this video? Please let me know in the comments below. And so with that being said, I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for leaving a like, a comment on social media or on YouTube. I truly do appreciate it. And also, thank you so much for all of you that support me on Patreon. It allows me to continue doing YouTube, focus on YouTube, make these videos, keep the lights on, allow me to keep eating. It does mean a lot, and I appreciate that. So you all have a wonderful day or night, wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.